This is Audio Gyan, and I am your host Kedar Nimkar. Welcome to a deep dive into the minds of luminaries from the Indian creative world. Today's guest has built giant cakes, designed cozy mountain homes and boozy retro diners, created fake airplanes and architected an house for a doll. Although her work is deeply rooted in architecture, interior design, we'll be talking about space, exhibition, and set design. We have Kamini Rao with us on AudioGAN. She's a multidisciplinary designer with a focus on collective experiences using art and architecture. She founded Studio Slip in 2018 with an aim to bring an experimental approach to interior design. At Slip, she heads a team of architects and designers, and together they design cultural spaces, museum, and exhibitions, but also work in commercial and residential realm. So welcome Kamini to AudioGAN, and it's a real pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for giving your time.
Thanks, Kedar. It's really nice to be here. I'm in awe of all your previous guests, and I'm excited to be on your show today.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. And as I started off with your introduction, which is actually taken from your website. So I wanted to start off by asking, that will also set the premise to the rest of the conversation that, what kind of work do you exactly do? Like, if you could give us a sense of, because it sounds very cool, and you have a diverse portfolio, huge body of work. So if you can just help us understand what kind of work exactly you do.
Absolutely. So sometimes I find it complicated to explain as well because I do so many different things. At the end of the day, it all comes to spatial design. It's the same skill set that I share across the 4 disciplines. So we do predominantly 4 different types of design. The first one being commercial, the bread and butter. We do lots of offices. We have a little niche in the science and medical space. So in these commercial interiors, we worked on vaccination plants. We've worked for CIPLA and Hester Biosciences. We worked with India Institute of Science, the National Center for Biological Sciences, and very recently, as of last week, with NIMHANS, which is the Mental Health Institute in Bangalore.
In Bangalore, yeah.
And so that's one section of my design. Then we have residential, which I know everybody can sort of understand quite quickly, so I won't go into that in detail. And then the 2 interesting things that we also do alongside these projects are exhibition design and set design. Exhibition and sets can't be they can be plugged in together because they're sort of short-term, very quick turnover projects, but the way you think about them are very different. So for sets, we do ads and films, mostly local to Bangalore. The big sets and films are done in Bombay, of course. But whenever there's a local production happening in Bangalore, we are one of the few production designers who do some of those sets. And exhibitions, which is the last design category that we dabble in, is to do with the museum space and the educational space. And that's been really fun to work on as well because we learn every time we work on a new project.
Great. So as you said about interior design for residential, people know about it. I am definitely interested in the commercial side of things also, but more interested in exhibition design and a bit of set design also, because that's not covered in AudioGAN so far. And also, please feel free to take examples from your commercial projects also to help us understand how these things are made. But if I were to start with exhibition design predominantly, can you give some examples or what kind of brief you guys get? Who are the entities? How does it come to be, right? How is this entire thing set up? If with an example or like at an abstract level also.
Okay, I would say exhibition and set design, the brief comes from the product or the I wouldn't say product. I would think of it almost as a branding project where you have this not necessarily product, but a bit of information, and you're trying to get a lot of different consumers / viewers to understand. So when we're looking at it through a spatial lens, but also we're looking at multiple stakeholders and an audience. So when it comes to exhibition design, there are two main things that you have to keep in mind. One is the actual space, because now everything has to be decided according to the parameters of these four walls. And I would say that content is the biggest factor that we design around. So the exhibitions that we've done in the past, one was for a handloom sari foundation, one was for this very, very exciting nanotourism initiative in Arunachal Pradesh, where we were looking at the Monpa tribe, their culture, and sort of displaying it for the year of Arunachal had 2020 was a year of tourism. Of course, that went out of the window, but just at the beginning, just before COVID, I was there for a few weeks before COVID hit, putting this whole festival up and designing a museum around their culture. So if you talk about the process, it's really about the content
sorry, I'll just interrupt you. But when you said about content design in the beginning, can you elaborate? Like, is it the text? Is it what does the exhibition stand for? That content, or is it like I'm just trying to understand what do you mean by content at this?
I can elaborate. So we have in each exhibition it's different. So of course, every exhibition you kind of see what the target audience is. And so there are different target audiences for different exhibitions. And once we identify who that is, then we start designing according to that. So there's always content. I think the brief always comes from, say, for example, the Nimhan's exhibition that we did last week. We knew it had to be an accessible exhibition for people who spoke Kannada and English. It had to be for children as well as adults. So we knew that it couldn't be too heavy. The matter had to be light. And so it all starts from the content and the target audience, and then sort of figuring out how to curate the information, and then how to visually, or not only visually, but like display it through objects, through visuals, through sound. And so we look at all the five senses and we break down the content so that it's digestible to different people of different walks of life.
But I was under the impression that the content is given typically by the organizer. Like, how does it happen? Like, say, let's take Nihams as an example, and like, if you can disclose, like, what was the theme about it, and then that will be given by Nihams to Slip, and then Slip will design it, for lack of a better word, but in fact, yeah, it will design, right? You guys will design it.
Correct.
So how does it happen?
So the content is given to us. We usually work with the research team and a curation team. And sometimes we don't really help with the research as much, because that'll be a 6 months long effort that happens before we come on board. So research is done for around 6 months, and all the information is sort of vetted by Nimhans. And then once the doctors vet it to say, like, this is okay, we can, there's no problems to put this out there in the public space, then we sort of like together with the curation team, we sort of bring it down to the essence of the exhibition. So the one that we just did was an archival exhibition. We were looking at, it was a little research heavy, but we were looking at the archives of Nimhans from the 1920s to the 1970s. Now I can do 800 exhibitions on that same information over and over again, and it's very difficult to narrow down that information. So I think what happens is, because there's so many teams involved, we sort of cut information. Each team cuts out information to get the final content. So Nimhans, for example, the doctors say, hey, this is a disease that there's too much information about, and we don't need to display it. Let's look at severe diseases. And then within severe diseases, the research team says, hey, listen, this severe disease might be too triggering for people. We don't want people to come in there and feel panic or feel targeted or anything. So that got removed. And then as the design team, we said, hey, listen, this content is too much and cannot fit on this wall. So we just have to remove these stories. So there's a spatial play. There's so many things involved to come down to the final content.
Got it. Got it. So if I'm understanding it correctly, it's almost a curation plus design job where you are listening to the brief and what they want to put out, but you are also aware of what kind of audience are going to come in through your research, and then you find the right balance as to what to show, and after what to show is locked, then how to show.
Correct. Correct.
Okay, so can you share any nuances of how to show, how does that happen?
I can. So I'll give you two examples. The exhibition that I told you about in 2020 that had to do with the Monpa tribe and their culture. That was a little tricky because we had a lot of objects to show on display, but we had very little information. Everything was, it was just an oral history that was not in the English language and was very difficult to understand the significance of each object. So in that exhibition, it was an object heavy exhibition. We had lots of objects to display. We had just one or two lines to explain each object. But if someone, a viewer, an audience, someone from outside the Monpa tribe came and asked us a little more information about it, we would stumble a little bit because we just didn't have, it's 100-year-old history. They don't have a written language. They just have, a few lines here and there about their grandmothers. And so that was an object heavy, but written content was less. The opposite happened in Nimhans, where we had so much written content that it was so difficult to display it on the walls without it looking like a brochure on the walls. So it was a tricky situation we had to get a graphic designer on board to create illustrations that were approved by Nimhans because, it has to be their government organization. They're very strict about what can be seen and what not, and how they are projected to the world as well. And the exhibition is called Notes on Madness, but we didn't want to make it seem like, everything in there was mad. We wanted to say like, it's okay if you feel any of these things, it's okay. So the opposite happened in Nimhans, where just, we had 2 or 3 objects. We really had to pull in for graphics. We had to make sure there was audio and videos and things like that to engage the user, engage the audience.
Mm-hmm. And are there other types of exhibitions that you have engaged in? I mean, I got the gist of how these things are shaping up, but I remember, I think Sudhir Nadkarni I interviewed long time back, and he also spoke about exhibition design. And my perception was more of setting up the area completely, which has entry, exit, and ways to sort of navigate through inside. And so, are there any best practices, or in terms of, or not even best practices, I would say, are there like patterns of different types of exhibitions? Something is like just FYI, something which is you have to buy stuff, and sometimes it just, I don't know, some military kind of stuff which is kept and you have to just look at it.
Okay, so the way I go about the exhibitions is I love to go to museums, and I design for myself, and so there are different ways to go about it. I feel like there's always some interaction in the exhibitions that I design. So it's not just a simple walkthrough. I always make sure that firstly it's accessible. So if there's text on the wall, it's disabled friendly. It's fine for an elderly person. They'll be able to see the font sizes. There's always a little bench or somewhere to sit and reflect. There's always an interaction point. So I make my exhibition slightly immersive. I make them slightly playful, and I make sure that anyone can enjoy it. So whether it's a child or an elderly person, it's accessible for all. In terms of, I talked a lot about the curation of an exhibition, but I didn't really talk about the design. I think curation is the first aspect of it. But once you slowly come into the design, I think then it's a lot playful. We get colors and we get fonts and we get different table structures or seating structures, and because it's a temporary sort of space, we are allowed to be more playful, because these things don't have to last more than 3 months to a year. An exhibition is always revolving, and therefore we have we have a chance to be a little more bold with our designs. So if you want the ceiling and the floors blue, we did an entire exhibition that was so I think because these exhibitions are temporary structure, we can be very bold with our designs. The last exhibition that we did, which ended in Jan this year, was at the National Center for Biological Sciences, and we created in a very small space in their archive. We almost made an immersive medical lab meets aquarium. So the person walking in almost didn't know if they were looking into an aquarium or if they were inside an aquarium and people were looking in. So we played a lot with flashing lights and flowy movements of textiles. And we encapsulated the entire space in a dark navy blue. So they really felt like they were in an ocean. And there was lots of light boxes where people were meant to look at. So it's almost like you're looking into a body of, it was called Bodies at Sea. And so it was an exhibition that was looking at the differences between the human body and bodies in the ocean in a scientific and artistic manner. So I think that exhibition was really fun because you sort of felt like you were in a different world.
Yeah. It sounds very fascinating. I mean, I'm in Singapore right now, and there are a lot of cool setup and cool museums and immersive experiences. I recently went for a Van Gogh museum, Van Gogh like a walkthrough, and it was quite amazing. Cool. So maybe we'll take some bits of the set design piece also. If you could tell us like how does the world change when you move to set design?
Okay, set designs. So we don't do as many set designs as exhibitions and the other sort of designs. And the reason it's very intense, I would say. The timelines are much shorter. You have to do an entire whole production set in a week, and it's all hell breaks loose, and you really have to think on your feet. The biggest exhibition that we've done, I'm not exhibition, sorry. The biggest set design that we have done was the giant rotating cake that you mentioned in the bio. And if anyone listening can, of course, look at it on the website. But we were asked to create for a stock brokerage app. They were creating a YouTube sort of video, and in this type of design, you're given a script. So it's just one sheet A4 paper of like everybody's lines and a little bit of background information, and then that goes to a visualizer who makes thumbnails of the entire design, and that comes to you as a package. And you get to be creative about what size and what colors and things like that, because I think when you work in set designs, you sort of know what looks good on camera. So I know what colors look good, I know what colors don't look good, and therefore when we're creating this, we have a little more leeway in terms of how we want it to feel. So the giant rotating cake was 2 stories. It wasn't made of actual cake. It was made out of plywood, it had thermocol. It was honestly not very environmentally friendly, but it just gets set up for a day. It does its thing during the shoot, and then it slowly comes apart, and then it goes into different projects or scrapped to small pieces. The exciting thing about the cake, we genuinely got 1 week to do it. It was very hectic. It was all-nighters for a whole week. And of course, the clients had to sign off. There's a production company that's the middleman. So we're sort of, at the end of the scale where we get lots of little bits of information trickle down, and it's very last minute. And I think on the actual shoot day, we rented. If you've seen car ads, you'll see them spinning on a big sort of wheel, and it's on a motor. So we rented one of those motors to put this huge cake. But the cake was heavier than a car, and the motor broke on the day of our shoot.
Oh.
So then it was, and as a woman in this industry, there's only me and there's 10 other men, and we literally had to take a big rope, rope it around the entire wheel, and then slowly pull behind the camera. So there's some BTS on our Instagram, but you'll see the entire production like filming, and we are hiding behind the cake, pulling the cake.
Wow. Yeah, like it's actually fun. The reason why I'm more interested in also set design and planning to get few more guests who have done it very extensively is because when I was in college, I remember there was this film called, I forgot the name of the film, but it had Anil Kapoor, Preeti Zinta, and Amitabh Bachchan. It was on doctors, and I was in my whatever, just like roaming around near the college, and somebody came and said, "Hey, do you know like C++?" And I said, "Yeah." I was like in my computer sort of graduation, and he said, and I said yes. So he took me to Goregaon in one of the studios, and he said, "Listen, this is the first time they are doing a sync sound, so the camera will capture everything that's happening, and they have a monitor, and there's an operation happening, and the monitor will have this beeping sound, but we don't want the beep, we just want the line to go through it. So can you change it?" And I said, "For sure, I can change it, but I need the source file." "No, no, you have the compiled file, you won't have the source file." So finally it didn't happen, but it happens very, very like abichi types.
Yeah, it's very hectic, and you really need to think on your feet and not, yeah, as tired as you are, you still have to keep going till that final wrap up is done.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, so maybe we can like take few more examples of exhibition design itself. And since I mentioned about the Van Gogh Museum, which I saw, I wanted to ask you like, then where do ideas come from? Because each brief will be very different. I'm sure it it will involve a lot of traveling. It will involve a lot of looking at actual physical tactile things, as opposed to in our world where we can just open Behance and check things. So how does it happen with you, like you and your team?
So I think it goes all over the place actually. I don't know if there is a strategic process to it. We go through a lot of brainstorming as a team, and we just like sit around a table and we throw absolutely every idea out there possible. And then our ideas get cancelled out based on one, like the amount of we at this point we know how much money we have to work with. So we already know like, hey, this is a little bit too much, we can't afford this. And then we sort of like hone down our ideas a little bit. Once we sort of hone it down, we go into 3D and we start tweaking with the ways that we design. So there was another exhibition that we worked on a couple of years ago. I think this was in 2019. That was the one with the sari exhibition. And the sari exhibition, because we're using a lot of textiles, we knew we wanted a lot of flow. And so it was at the Bangalore International Center, and we just used the architecture of that space and just started chucking these saris through holes, through anything that we could. So that was a very organic way of looking at the exhibition. So sometimes it's a situation where it's a build, it's a set, it's a exhibition set build, and you have to have it all planned to the T. But sometimes you get these fluid organic forms, and you just like keep throwing them around till you get something you like, and it's a little bit like a mad scientist. But I have to say, it's when it comes to set design, which is, I think you have a little less time. You don't have that much time to experiment. So in other type of the other designs that we do, we have time to work on our idea and refine our idea and change our idea. But when it comes to set design, you only have that much time. The client has to approve, and then you go straight. You're coordinating with the director, you're coordinating with the DOP, you're coordinating with so many different people and sets and wardrobes and things like that, that you don't have enough time to refine an idea. Whatever your first idea, whatever your first thought is in mind, it's the final idea. And so that's also, it's tricky because you have to be like very certain and very happy and to go forward. In exhibition time, you have time because the research takes so much time that you have time to change things. As the content changes, you keep refining your ideas. The other,
So how
the
long does this typically, like say, suppose there's a week-long exhibition, how much time does it take to prepare? Like,
Oh, exhibitions will take a little longer than a week. Usually, at the
no,
minimum,
no,
they're a
no,
month.
I'm saying like if it's a week-long exhibition, how does the window look like? If it's 1 week long, then do you take 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, or like for the preparation and research?
I would say the preparation and research for exhibition design would all be the minimum 3 months and maximum to a year. At least the exhibitions that I have worked on so far. Of course,
Hmm.
there are big exhibitions coming into Bangalore, I mean, not Bangalore, India, that have been had years in planning. And as more money comes into this exhibition space, you'll get more and more time to work on things and refine things. But the opposite is in set design. There is a lot of money in set design, but it's a commercial project, so time is money. You have to do it really quick. There's one set design that we worked on. I think this was one of the first set designs that I worked on, where we created a fake aeroplane. And I think one of your questions actually mentions it about, everything on the camera is so perfect and everything behind it is chaos. I actually enjoy that. I think there's
Okay.
something, I enjoy that I can just look this side and this side, and it's a different world altogether. Some of the best parts about these set designs are the behind the scenes, the mess, all the lights and the camera, and people shushing and people eating little snacks behind. I think that's what makes it fun, because if everything's perfect like it is in an ad, then that's not life, No one wants to live in that sort of reality. You want to live in this little jugaad, messy bit, but also have these moments of perfection. So
Sorry. Yeah, no. So I was yeah actually some great insights there. So like, how do you or where do you seek inspiration from? That was the main question, because do you travel? Do you like go to other exhibitions, or like where does that moment of कि यार इस बार ऐसे करेंगे, or how is it guided also? Like, is it guided by the theme? Because you gave an example in BIC, you put in saris. So like other things that guide you to do it in a particular way and not, or sometimes there are constraints. If you can give us some glimpses there.
My inspiration comes from everything. I love to travel. I think that's everyone's answer, but I don't think that's my answer. I think I take a lot of inspiration from like having a sense of humor. I think, firstly, to be an Indian in India, you have to laugh, because everything goes wrong all the time. There's just so much jugaad happening all the time. And if you get angry about it, what's the point? So you just have to laugh. And like, there's some sort of, I think because I find things quite amusing, it allows me to be playful in my work life. And like, just anything from walking down the road and seeing some bike guy do something ridiculous that someone else would be angry to, I find it funny. So I get a lot of like my inspiration just from day to day, walking around, taking the metro, getting into an auto, and just like observing things, the funny signs behind the auto, or people's car bump stickers. And like that gives me a lot of inspiration to be like, this world is funny, this country is funny. I think we are playful by nature, and my work becomes playful by nature. And because I started this studio with that intent, like it's called Studio Slip, because I just wanted to say like, hey, even if I slip and fall, like it's okay. I'll find myself in a new and unexpected place. And that's the ethos, is to take a risk and to find yourself somewhere random. And that's why I do so many random things. And because of that, for the last 5 years, I've been doing that. All the clients who've been coming to me, or are like, who are keen to work with me, also have that same mentality. And so it means that I get these unique people who want to do unique things, just because I've made it a goal of mine.
Nice, nice. So how, like you mentioned about the fake plane, is making fake always on budget, or sometimes are there any stories of like not making it fake, and but you had to make it fake even though you had the budget? Anything?
Yeah, I have lots of fake stories. Um, we had one of the semi-scandalous things that I had to do. I was working on 5 set designs for a fine art photographer called Arjun Kamath. I'm not sure. Actually, in fact, you should interview him at some point as well. He's very interesting. And now he's become a long-term client of mine. So first we did this. I did 5 set designs for him, and then after that I did his office. Now I'm doing his home, and now I'm doing his mother's home. So he's become
Wow.
like this long-term client where I've done all. Now next we need an exhibition with him, and I've covered all my 4 set of like residential, commercial, set, and exhibition. I would have finished off with this one guy. So he's a very unique uh, photographer, and he wanted to do something called the Anxiety series. And he wanted to have 5 fine art photographs that won a lot of awards. And he did this in 2019, just before COVID. So it really took off because it each picture talked about a different type of anxiety. So there was one in particular where we're talking about fake. There was one photo where we were talking about the fear of death, and there was a funeral pyre that I had to build. So lots of getting cut wood, putting it all together, and we had to create these bodies. Like it's a Hindu scene, a Hindu funeral scene, and I had to create entire bodies made out of newspaper. And in the middle of, like, of course you have so little time, so in the middle of the night, it's my entire office. It's my staff at home, like everybody who could, wrapping balls of newspaper to create this human body, and then wrapping it with, saffron colored cloth. And then we placed these, and sellotaping it together. Really, it was very art school sort of project. And then placing it at this at the set of this picture. And so that was obviously I'm not going to use real dead body. So of course that was a fake dead body situation to make it look very realistic. Then in the same day we had the second shoot, and that was it was sort of trying to depict a sense of anxiety about not being able to leave home. And so there was a model, actually an actress, Shweta Tripathi, who had come in to shoot that. And this was all shot in Minerva Mills, which is an abandoned mill. And we literally like got furniture from some of our residential projects. We got curtains, we got everything. And there was an empty, decrepit, falling down mill, and we just set it up like a bedroom. And over here we were supposed to put tarantulas all over her body and all over the set to make it just to depict the fear. And over here we didn't use fake tarantulas because they were looking too fake. So we tested out before, and we had them all imported and had actual tarantulas on set.
Wow.
And I actually have, in the office, we have these jars, and each jar is a souvenir jar for each of our projects. And for that project, I have 2 tarantulas still in the jar. Of course, they're dead. But I have 2 tarantulas for my souvenir from that project.
Wow. Amazing stories, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how much overlap does architecture, interior design, or furniture design, or I don't know, industrial design, like how, like knowing them is good enough, or to have certain command over it's good? Like, I mean, how does it help in your practice?
So I didn't study any of these things. I studied this spatial design course in an art school, and I think because I did that, it gives me the flexibility to dab into these other fields. Of course, I have an office full of very qualified architects and interior designers and the works. But I think just because I went to an art school, I have this sort of ability to think of all of it in the same way. I think there are definite overlaps, especially when it comes to the actual skills involved. If you really come down to it, it's AutoCAD drawings, it's carpentry drawings. Whether you're creating a home or a set or an exhibition, those are the same skill sets that are shared across. It's only scale. You're thinking big scale or small scale. And as long as your mind can grapple that, I think they're all pretty much similar to each other. Of course, one thing is different. In a set design, there's no you don't need structural integrity. It can all fall down. As long as it stays up for the camera for those few hours, it can collapse. And sometimes it does. But obviously, when we're doing a commercial space or a home, that has to start last 20 years. You're using much better materials. You're spending a lot more money and time and honing that a lot more. But yeah, there's definite overlaps for sure in all of these things.
So, in the design world, we have this saying, right? Great design is invisible design. Like you almost are not noticing it. I mean, even like it goes with typography as well, right? If it's done well, you don't notice the font, as in the typeface. So, is there something similar in exhibition design that it feels very natural, it feels very intuitive, it feels almost organically laid down? Is that a pursuit also?
They're different in design. There are different ways of thinking about it. There's less is more. There's more is more. You can go any way, and I would think the same with different types of design. In fashion, you could be extra, you could be maximalist, you could be minimalist. So I don't think design is invisible necessarily. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's important to be. I would say when it comes to accessibility and things like that, people shouldn't notice. They should just be like, hey, this is easy to read for anybody, or this space is easy to navigate for anybody. That way, that's invisible and that's perfect. That's how it should be. But in terms of boldness or grabbing attention and things like that, we're not afraid to do any of that. I don't think a lot of our work is invisible. I think it's very loud and calling your attention. But I like to think of both. I think some types of design have to be invisible and subtle, and that is a successful type of design.
Cool. And can you tell me about like your collaboration, because I happened to interview Ruchika Nambiar also.
Yes.
So yeah, if you could tell a bit about the doll project and any other exciting project that you have worked on. I mean, how different was it for working at a miniature scale? You just now spoke about its scale. It seems like I've seen some videos, and it seems to be very intricate, very detailed, very small scale kind of a setup. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the doll project and any new learnings there.
Okay, I'm happy to talk about Ruchika's. I did realize she was on your show earlier, and that's quite exciting. I'm a very close friend of hers, and it was amazing to work on this dollhouse together. So that is the set design. I would consider that a set design. The way that came about, the process was very much like how we do it with any of our interior our residential clients. So the client comes with a brief. She told us, she said, hey, I have this desk space of 2 by 2. That's the plot size. And, my doll is living in a drawer and she's moving up in life, and we have to design our house. And because essentially at the end of the day, the project is a photography project. So we knew the windows had to be big enough for the hands to go in. We knew the ceiling heights had to be big enough. If you talk about scale, we just needed to make sure that the scale was big enough for it to be a photography project, that walls could come apart and go back in together. But apart from that, the process was like a residential client. She gave us our brief. We had back and forths. We'd really treated it like every other project. I talked to a lot of my vendors, Jaipur rugs, who I buy rugs from for my residential clients. I spoke to them and said, I like these 5 rugs. Can I get permission to print them in miniature? Because I didn't want to plagiarize their rugs. And they were really happy. They were like, yeah, go ahead, go for it. And so we collaborated with different brands, the people who supply my fabrics, Fab India. I took their actual swatches. Via Fabrics is another brand that I work with. I took their swatches and we just decorated this entire house. It was tricky because this obviously is a set design, but it has to hold. I didn't want the whole thing tumbling and falling apart. So we had load-bearing walls, we had columns, we had all the things a normal house would have. The fun part about working with Ruchika and Little R was any back and forth I had with her became a little story in her dollhouse project story. So when we sent her technical drawings to approve, they would go in little miniature envelopes with our Studio Slip logo. And every time we had a small argument or a disagreement, that doll would be shaking her head on Instagram saying, "I've just fought with the architect." And so it was really nice because it was like a playful version of what we go through with our actual clients. If there were changes or there were modifications, every interaction we had became a story in this doll's life. In terms of the actual build, it was very tricky. Ruchika did most of the production or the build herself, but we spent a lot of hours going over there after work. It was actually a little bit through COVID when they relaxed, so our work was a little slow, and we'd go over to our house and we'd create these cement floors and Jaisalmer floors. And I would say it took as long as as a regular project. I think we did 1 year of planning and the build slowly over another year, so it was 2 years in total. And after that, it was so wildly popular. So many people got in touch with me to do miniatures, and I said, just the one. I'm not doing any more. It's the same amount of work as a full-blown house, but obviously the pay is so much smaller. I'm trying to actually think if there are any other sets that I want to talk about, but sets or exhibitions. I told you about the Arjun Kamath one. Yeah, I think it's okay. There are 2 more in there, but they're smaller ones, so it's all right.
Got it. Okay, so we'll take it from here then. Okay, cool. I think it's quite fascinating to know so many different facets, and I'm sure working with you will be like a different experience altogether because it's residential, it's commercial, and everything. I just wanted to conclude with one last question. Is like, how does the future look like in terms of exhibitions and real spaces when things are moving to metaverse?
I don't think the physical space will ever change. People want raw experiences. People want brick and mortar experiences. They want tactile experiences. And even though we're going into a metaverse, and it already exists with online shopping and things like that. I think at the end of the day, maybe real life experiences will become niche, will become sought after. I think there'll be more and more queues, more and more people will want to go have actual real world experiences, see exhibitions for real. And it's sort of like how these old records have come back in fashion, and later cassette tapes will come back in fashion. I think physical spaces will come back in fashion. You can see everything on Google or on 3D with augmented reality, but actual spaces will become a trend again, which is a weird thing to say, that physical experience is a trend, but I think we'll lose base with it. People will opt for augmented reality and things like that, or VR experiences, and then one day they'll be fed up and they say, "Hey, let's actually go to this thing."
Yeah, I love it. In fact, yeah, that's a very positive note, and I hope it doesn't happen it doesn't happen soon. That's it. Like, that's the only hope, but it's inevitable.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Cool. I think we can end on this note. Thanks a lot, Kamini, for giving your time. It was wonderful talking to you, and I know every conversation is just feels yaar aur bahut kuch janna hai, but yeah, we'll wrap it up for now.
Okay, thank you so much. It was actually really fun to be here.
So thanks. Okay, that's it. And that's it from today's Gyan session. For show notes and more Gyan, visit audiogyan.com. And if you wish to connect with me, I am at AudioGyan Moments on Instagram. Until then, take care.